Okay, thank you, Amanda. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker tonight, and I thought of Mr. Jim Jump when I was at a conference a few years ago, and there's this association called the National Association of College Admission Counseling, a NACAC, and we also have a local arm of it as well. And it brings together people from the high school side with the people from the college side to promote best practices and cooperation and sharing of information and things like that. And I had spent the rest of my morning in some sessions that were pretty heavy on detail, talking about the changing dynamics of college admissions and international applications and changes in the Common App and technical things. And the whole thing was getting me a little bit down. And then the next speaker really lifted my head up and kind of helped me put the sort of process in perspective and kind of remember what it's all about. And that kind of re-energizes us when we hear things like that, and we're able to bring it back to the students and then produce the best college application process, including all those details that can be daunting, but from an even better point of view. And so I was really grateful for Mr. Jump for talking to me that day. And I remember his message, and I thought it would be great if we could share that with you. Mr. Jump is from a school in Michigan called St. Christopher's, and we're really grateful to have him tonight. So with that, I'll give you Mr. Jim Jump.
It is a pleasure to be here. You've gotten a lot of good information already. My job is to talk about the big picture, which I believe is a euphemism for I will talk about a lot of vague generalities after the specific information you've gotten. My goal tonight is to give you a framework for thinking about the journey of self-discovery that all of you will be taking this year. Hopefully, because you're here, you figured out that I'm talking about the college admissions process. And you're going to hear me use that journey metaphor several times in my remarks to you. Now, some of what I'm going to say to you might be too general, some of it might be too specific, because this process is very individual. Each one of you has different needs, different issues that are going to come up, and so I would urge you, use the resources you have here with your College and Career Center and with your counseling staff. They are here to help you, and they are anxious to do that. I'd like to start with some opening remarks, and I'm going to direct them both to the seniors and also the parents. So each of you are free to listen in when I talk to the other group. Let me start with the seniors. The college process is first and foremost an opportunity to think about who you are and what you want from your life. In many ways, choosing a college qualifies as your first adult decision, certainly the transition from adolescence to adulthood. So what does that mean when we talk about an adult decision? Well, first of all, the adult decisions are important, not trivial. Like decisions about whom to marry or what career to pursue, where you attend college has the potential to influence every single day as long as you live. Adult decisions don't have easy, obvious answers. You don't know in advance what the right thing to do is. Therefore, you have to weigh the pros and cons and make the best choice you can rather than a perfect choice. Now, the good news is usually you're choosing from between options, both of which or all of which are good. I want to stop for a minute because there are some myths about this process, and there's one in particular that I think can be really paralyzing. And that's the myth that you will fall in love with a college at some point. Now, that certainly happens to some people, but it does not happen to everyone. A year ago, I had several seniors at the end of the process. They were getting ready to make their final college choice, and they said, I just haven't had that moment. I haven't fallen in love with the place. And I've had to reassure them that that was okay. And in fact, I would actually argue that you might make a better choice if you don't have the falling in love experience than you do if you do. So don't feel like there's anything wrong with you if you don't have that aha moment when you're on a college campus. It is a myth that it happens to everyone. Now, in the college process, you may not get what you want, or even, as my children used to say, what you really want, as if it really want means you deserve it more and it has to happen. That's an excellent introduction to adulthood. College admission is not easy, partly because you're constantly asked about it. Every adult in your life is going to ask you about college stuff because they don't know what else to talk to you about. So just get used to that. The college admissions process is the most important thing you will do this year. Long after you've forgotten specific academic assignments or games or social events, the decisions you make about the college process will stick with you and influence your life. So give it the time and attention it deserves. Senior year tends to be hectic. Make sure you schedule time to think about college. This is something you should be ready for and excited about. It's an opportunity that you haven't had before to think about the next step in your life. Let me turn to the parents. I believe the college process is harder on parents than it is on students for several reasons. One, it tests your basic beliefs both about college admission, about parenting, and maybe about life. Do you believe that the college admissions process is rational and fair, or do you believe it's a game where everybody's got an angle that dictates how you treat it? Is your job as a parent to protect your children from disappointment or to prepare them for independence? How you answer that question influences how you approach this process. Now, the challenge that all of us have as parents, I learned a long time ago that I derive far more pleasure from my children's accomplishments and feel more pain at their disappointments than anything that happened in my own life. And that's something to guard against. You have to guard against the we're applying to, and that the admission or non-admission is not a judgment on you as a parent. Now the other issue, and students, I'm going to give away one of your secrets, is that our children learn to manipulate us and push our buttons. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents come in my office and say, they think we're stupid. Well, they don't, but they're perfectly happy to let you believe that. For many students, discover the awesome power of non-communication. If I don't tell you anything, I control you. And for many of them, it's a fine art form. So be prepared for that. Finally, as parents, we are susceptible to what I call suburban legends. You will hear all kinds of stuff through this process, and I urge you to disregard most of it. You can tell when it's really sketchy, the string of relationships. So an urban legend is usually about a friend of a friend. A suburban legend happens to a coworker's brother-in-law's daughter's boyfriend's best friend. So when you start hearing that they got into Dartmouth because of that, you know you're probably up against that. Finally, worry about those who are trying to make a living off of the anxiety you may feel about this process. Summer programs, honor societies, scholarship services, essay consultants, test prep companies. Some of them are perfectly legitimate services to have, but understand they're trying to make a living. So don't feel like you have to do it, and that you can't go to college without buying into all that stuff. Finally, there's a website called College Confidential, which is a kind of a gossip site. Stay away from that. That brings out the craziness in everyone. So, the college process measures readiness for college. So the same qualities that are important in being successful in college are measured in the application and the search process. Independence, maturity, self-knowledge, self-management, persistence. So parents, I urge you, don't just let your child take ownership of the process, make them take ownership of the process. Now, seniors, where are you in the process and where should you be at this point? I think the college search is a three-part process, and the better job you do at each stage of the process, the easier the rest of it becomes. So the three phases are what I would call self-evaluation, research, and then the application process. Let me talk about each of them very briefly. All right, so self-evaluation is where you ask, who are you, what do you want from the college experience? And if you haven't answered that question, it can be really hard to put together a college list. At its simplest level, choosing a college is choosing a place to live for the next 4 years. So what you need to think about is, what are the things that are important to my lifestyle, and choose on that basis. So there are some obvious things. Size makes a huge difference in the kind of experience you have. You will get a very fundamentally different experience in a large university than you will in a small liberal arts college. It's not to say either one of them is right or wrong, they're just different. Some students choose to avoid that decision by deciding to go to a medium-sized college because it's small enough to be personal, but large enough to have great facilities. And maybe that's true, but I also want you to consider that perhaps a medium-sized school is just big enough to be impersonal and small enough to have facilities that are maybe not as good as a big university. So there's no perfect answer. So size, first thing. Second, location, in two senses. What part of the country do you want to go to? Would you prefer to be in an urban environment, a suburban environment, in a college town, in a rural area? Those are things to think about. Academic fit. Do you want to go to a place that is intellectual, a place where people work hard and are achievement-oriented, or a place that's primarily social? And I would urge you, be honest with yourself. Don't answer what we as adults want you to know, what we want you to choose. But there's nothing worse than going to a college that is very different from what you want. So if you are somebody who is serious about your education and you go someplace where everybody else goes to class only as a diversion from parties, you're going to be miserable. If you're interested primarily in social life and everybody else is serious about their work, you're going to be miserable. So look for that fit. And I'm going to come back to that word. If journey is an important word, fit is an important word also. A couple other things that people think are overrated that I don't. Climate. If you're somebody who can't stand cold weather, you probably shouldn't go to college in Minnesota or Maine because there's no warm season. Food. Food is, if you are like most students, food is an important part of your life. Therefore, it is, I think, legitimate to factor in how good is the food when you're choosing a college. And now parents, cost is a big issue, obviously. And what I would say about that is if cost is an issue, make sure you have that conversation up front with your student. There's nothing worse than a student applies, falls in love with the place, gets accepted, and then finds out we can't afford it. So if cost is going to be an issue, have that discussion up front. And the way you can deal with that is on your list of colleges, have not only academic safeties, but financial safeties as well. All right, the second phase of the college process is what I would call research. And research is a combination of information and gut feel. Now, I don't know if any of you do this. When I work with primarily boys. So when one of my students goes and visits a college, when they get back, what'd you think? And I will get one of two responses. I liked it, I didn't like it. And so then I'll try to, well, what'd you like? I liked it. So what I would ask you is pay attention to those gut feelings, but try to figure out, if you liked a place, why did you like it? What is it that telling you? Or if it didn't feel right, why didn't it feel right? Try to dig a little deeper in terms of what that's telling you. I would also urge you to think about this term as a senior. You should be doing what I call comparison shopping. So now it's not just about this place versus this place. What are the pros and cons of going to this place versus this place? What kind of experience will I have here? So you're doing much more comparison than you would have done as a junior. And then we move on to the application process, where you articulate who you are and what you care about. Now, no matter what the question on an application, every application is really asking the same question. What makes you special? Now, most of us are raised to be modest and not think there's anything really special about us. This is not a time to be modest. There is a big difference between bragging and knowing yourself well enough that you can articulate who you are. And so going back to that self-evaluation piece, if you don't know why a college should admit you, you can't expect them to figure it out for you. Right now, you are deciding not where to go, but where to apply. So you may ask, how many applications should you submit? Well, the classic answer to every college admissions question, according to Chris Gruber, who's the Dean of Admissions at Davidson College in North Carolina, is it depends. And that's true. So, some of you may apply to one school, a place you're happy with and love and are able to get in. Others of you may apply to more. That is something to work out individually with your counselor in terms of what's right for you. Does anyone know how many colleges there are in the United States? I'm giving you a quiz. I know I didn't announce a quiz. There are about 3,000 2- and 4-year colleges. 1,500 of them are 4-year. Now, every single one of those colleges is right for someone, and every single one of them is wrong for someone. What makes them right or wrong is the fit between your needs and expectations and the personality and culture of the college. So once again, that word fit. I think there are actually two competing, I'm going to call them worldviews, because they're almost at the level of philosophy. They're not based in fact, they're based in faith. There is the best college worldview and the best fit worldview. Right? So what's the difference? The best college worldview believes that what's most important in a college education is the name on the diploma. That choice is objective based on quality or prestige or selectivity. And a lot of colleges work hard to be hard to get into because they believe you will buy that they're better the harder they are to get into. Not true. That best college worldview is used by college rankings such as U.S. News, which try to convince you that, oh, the number 9 school must be much better than the number 22 school. Actually, if you look at the numbers, very little difference. One of the great things about higher education in the United States is how many outstanding institutions there are. You can get a good education at several hundred places, so don't pay attention to the best college worldview. As the logical stream of the best college worldview is that everyone should go to Harvard because it's Harvard. Well, the truth is, Harvard is an awful place for a lot of kids because Harvard's philosophy of undergraduate education is we're going to bring together the smartest kids in the country and let them educate each other. We're not going to give them a whole lot of guidance and support. So, if we were talking about restaurants, the best college worldview would mean that the best is most popular, therefore McDonald's would be the best restaurant. And I'm not offending, if any of you believe that, I'm not down with McDonald's. Now what about the best fit worldview? The best fit says what's important is the experience you have in college. College choice is subjective and personal. What's right for me may not be right for you, therefore choosing wisely is important. And it says that a college education is transformative. It should make you a more knowledgeable person, more discerning, more mature, more confident, and better prepared for adulthood. So how do colleges choose? Well, there's a key concept that dictates how they choose, and that is something known as selectivity. When we use this word selectivity, we're talking about how many qualified applicants are there compared to the number of spaces available. 90% of the colleges in the United States will admit any student who is judged capable of doing the work. 90%, if you can do the work, you're in. That means there are about 100 to 150 colleges that are truly selective. And in some of them, the top schools in the country, or the best known schools, the Ivies, the competition for admission can be hard to believe. They're admitting 5 to 6% of their applicants, which means your chances are not very good no matter how talented you might be. So how do selective colleges choose? There's a really simple answer. They choose selfishly. What do I mean by that? Colleges are complex institutions with complex goals, and they put together a freshman class to help them meet those goals. So if they have an athletic program, whether it's a place like Ohio State or a place like MIT, and MIT actually, for a long time, had more varsity teams than any other college in the country. If they have athletic teams, they are looking for students who can both do the work and compete successfully. They're looking for various kinds of diversity, whether ethnic or geographic. They're looking for people who have big bucks that can pay full price. And they're also trying to meet other needs. So for instance, if you play the bassoon and the orchestra needs a bassoon player, all things being equal, you might get in this year. Whereas if you apply next year, not so much because we already have a bassoon player. The rarer the talent or quality, the more valuable it becomes. So for instance, every school has a student council president, every school has a newspaper editor. So let me use an example. So say you play the trumpet, and you are the best trumpet player in your school. That sets you up as one of about 3,000 people nationwide. Say you're the best trumpet player in your state, now you're 1 out of 50. If you're the best trumpet player in the country, you're 1 out of 1. You might have something in terms of your trumpet playing getting you into college. Now, selective colleges are not necessarily interested in our feelings. Just this afternoon, before I drove down here, I had a meeting for my freshmen and sophomores, and Gil Villanueva, who's the Dean of Admissions at the University of Richmond, was kind enough to come over. And he said, what he said to them, he said, I'm paid by Richmond to bring in the best, most interesting class I can, not paid to be fair to you. Now, I could bring in 100 other college deans who have said the same thing, some of them not quite as nice as that. But they're paid to bring in their institutional goals and not necessarily care about our feelings as students or parents or counselors. I would say this, I don't think you get into college for no reason. College admission is not random. I know some people want to believe that. So that means you ought to think about, all right, what's my strategy for getting in? And I don't mean a strategy in the sense that I'm going to work it out, but I mean, for instance, ask these questions. Are you going to be a compelling candidate? Are you going to be somebody whose scores and grades are so superb that the college is going to read your application and say, we have to have this person? Are you going to be an acceptable candidate? Somebody who's got solid credentials, some are going to get in, some aren't. Now, at some of these high-powered places, I was at a meeting last year where 4 or 5 of the most selected colleges said 90% of the applicants to Ivies and near Ivies are qualified for admission, but very few, and the word they used was interesting. Now, my objection would be, I think a college education is supposed to make you interesting, but some of those colleges want you to not need a college education to be successful if they're going to admit you. All right. So if you're not going to be accepted, candidate. The third strategy is, are you going to be a special interest case? Are you going to get in despite your record? Now, it should be clear to you that some of these strategies are better than others. But if you're going to be a special interest case, you probably better be a blue chip athlete, and if you are, you probably already know that. Or you need to have won a Nobel Prize as a teenager, or you need to star in your own show on the Disney Channel. Now, one other strategy that I run into once in a while is I know someone. I have connections. I know someone who's going to get me in. I tend to believe that the connections work a lot less than most people think. A lot of times what I'll hear is, I know someone who's got influence. He wants to know where he should send his letter. Well, when I hear that, I know the person doesn't have the kind of influence you want, because one, he wouldn't be sending a letter, he'd be making a phone call. And secondly, he would know who to call. He wouldn't be asking you. So probably don't rely on connections to the extent that some people, at least in Richmond, want to. In the college process, there is data and there is voice. That's a distinction that Lee Coffin, who was the Dean of Admission at Tufts University in Boston, threw out at a panel I was on with him. And he says that data are things like strength of schedule, grades, scores, whereas voice are activities, essays, recommendations. Now, at most colleges, data is 98% of the decision. But if you are applying to a place where everybody has great scores and great grades, then voice becomes much more important. Similarly, if you are in a situation where your credentials placed you on the bubble in terms of who gets in and who doesn't, voice becomes more important. All right, on the data side, obviously this semester is your last chance to do your best work. And it's important that you give it your best shot, because you'll be glad if you did that. The Naviance scattergrams that we talked about earlier, they are great tools that measure data, because they measure GPA and test scores, and that will give you an idea, am I in the ballpark or not? But don't fall to there's one square who was admitted down at the bottom that looks like me, whereas there are a bunch of X's, which mean they didn't get in. That probably means there was a special interest case somewhere, but you'll get a good sense from that. There are schools, on the testing front, there are a number of schools, something like 500 now, that are test optional, that for some applicants, they don't require test scores. You usually have to do something else to do that. And actually, last year, for the first time, I encountered a couple of colleges that became transcript optional. There were a couple places that said, okay, you can submit a video and tell us why we should admit you, and you don't have to send a transcript. So any of you who would prefer for the college not to see your transcript, you might want to investigate a couple of those options. But there aren't many of them. Voice is activities, essays, recommendations. So let me talk about those quickly. All right, activities. Rarely will activities get you into college. They might tip the scales in a close call, but now I think 98% of most decisions are academic fit. With regard to activities, quality is more important than quantity. You know, it is better to have one or two things that you really care about and have really invested yourself in and are committed to than it is to have 15 things that are pretty superficial. You don't have to fill up every space on the application. Now, I'll give you a hint. If you ever apply to graduate school, right below the list where they ask for activities and honors, there's a big half page that will say, list your publications. They know most people don't have publications. But if you have published anything, they give you the opportunity to list. So don't feel like you have to fill up every space. List activities on the application in order of importance to you. What you care most about first, then second, then third. If you do that, you will come to a point where you can draw a line and say, everything above this line is really important to me and really significant. Everything below this line is filler. Get rid of the filler. They don't care about that. They're not impressed by things that you've done once or twice. The essay, I think, is one of the more misunderstood parts of the college process. An essay does not need to be a perfect example of grammar. Colleges are looking for insight, not grammar. Now, obviously, if you have lots and lots of mistakes, that says something about you, but they're not looking for a perfect paper. They're looking for what do you have to say. They're looking for content. As I said earlier, no matter what the question is, the real question is what makes you special. They want to know your unique experiences, your unique perspective, and everybody's got them. We just don't think about it that way usually. Some advice. All right, one, and I heard this from the dean at Richmond today, make sure you answer the question. Now that seems obvious, but it's amazing how many kids who, when asked about a book, write about a movie. So make sure you answer the question. Write about what you care about. One of the most important things you communicate, either as a speaker or as a writer, is your own enthusiasm for a subject. So write about the things that you care about, because that will come across, whereas if you're just dashing it off and you're not interested, that will also become apparent. Avoid description and have more analysis. Colleges don't want 80% of your essay to be describing an event. They want to know what you thought about it. How did it affect you? Avoid the obvious. The my trip to Europe, which could be a good topic, but I went to Europe, it was hot, got off the plane, couldn't find the hostel. I learned that everybody is different or everybody's alike, but people are happy despite how miserable their lives are. Colleges read lots of those essays. Now, so you could write a one that is unique to you, but be aware of that. The University of Virginia will never have an essay where they ask for what famous person would you like to have dinner with, because they don't want to read 10,000 essays about Thomas Jefferson. I've had an admissions dean friend say, if I read another essay about the 3 Ds, death, drugs, and divorce, I'll throw up. Now, for some of you, those could be transforming experiences to write about, but be aware that lots of kids write about them. Take time and edit. I'm ashamed to admit this. When I was in high school, I was a master, and actually in college, I was a master of the one draft term paper. I could sit down with term paper due tomorrow and write a single draft and get a good grade on it. I would never do that on a college essay. Take time and edit it. Above all, write an essay only you could write. Write an essay that's true to you that somebody else couldn't write. And also, don't take shorter essay questions for granted, because nowadays colleges expect that on the big essay, people are getting a lot of help and a lot of editing. The shorter essays tell them, what do you really write like? And especially that question that asks you, why are you interested in our institution? They are looking very carefully at that. Have you thought about why you're applying, or are you just tossing something off? And then recommendations. There's an old saying in college admissions that goes something like this: the thicker the folder, the thicker the student. All right, so what does that mean? It means if you're an admissions officer and you get a folder with 18 recommendations on top of it, when you get down to the transcript, you'll realize why there are so many recommendations there. So with regard to recommendations, once again, quality is more important than quantity. It is better to have one recommendation that really has insight into who you are from somebody who knows you well than it is to have a bunch of recommendations that don't say much. I'll give you a couple examples. A number of years ago, and I won't tell you which governor this was, there was a governor of Virginia who wrote to all the colleges and said, over the next 4 years, you're going to get a bunch of recommendations that look like this. Ignore them all. They're the recommendation I have to write for a constituent. When I really want to write you for somebody, it'll look differently than this. And then Bill Hartog, who is just retired as the Dean of Admissions at Washington Lee a number of years ago, said, I'm so tired of getting recommendations about what a fine family this student comes from. We're not breeding them, we're educating them. So the question is, does a recommendation letter add information that's not already in the folder? That's when it's valuable. And it's not who writes it, but what they have to say. When I was in college, I lived next door for a couple of years to an exchange student from France. And he was wealthy. His father, I think, owned half the Mercedes dealerships in France and then 7 Riviera hotels. I was editor of my college newspaper. We were the only college newspaper in the country that ran a full-page ad for a Riviera hotel. Well, when this guy graduated, he used to ask me for advice, and I didn't give him very good advice, I don't think. But anyway, he came in one day and said, I'm going to get a letter of recommendation from the Prince of Monaco, Prince Rainier. And I was like, yeah? And he said, yes, I'm applying to the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business, and he knows my father, and his wife is from Philadelphia. I think it might help. Well, he got a recommendation from the Prince of Monaco, and he did not get to the Wharton School of Business. But has done pretty well for himself, nevertheless. All right, we talked earlier about early decision and early action. I think early decision, which is binding, is something to pursue if and only if a couple things have happened. One, have you done enough research to know this is the one place I really want to be? Secondly, are you in a situation where you do not need your senior year to help your credentials? You are already, because it's going to be largely a decision based on your senior year. Now, with regard to early action, which is non-binding, different places put different emphasis on early action. I'm going to give you 3 examples from the publics in the state of Virginia. JMU has an early action, and their early action is actually probably tougher to get in than it is regular. Or I see very commonly, all students who apply get deferred, they'll get in the spring. Christopher Newport, if you don't apply early action, you're probably not getting in because they have put they want that as an emphasis. Whereas the University of Virginia is in the middle. They don't intend for early action to be any benefit. They want to take the same kids early that they're going to end up taking in the spring, and I see that every year in and year out that happens. We also mentioned the demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest, the Richmond dean today was saying that demonstrated interest is used by 1 in 5 colleges nationally. Most of them are private. Most of them are kind of mid-level selectivity. They're not the very top schools. It's the school who is a wannabe, wants to be more selective, and so they're trying to manage their enrollment by using demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest has always been part of the college process. You used to demonstrate interest by filling out an application. Well, then it became you demonstrate interest by visiting a campus or meeting with college rep when they come. There are some colleges that are starting to do some things that bother me and I think are sketchy. So for instance, if you get an email from a college, they now have the ability to track, did you open that email? They can track, did you open the attachment? It's the era of big data. And so they are making decisions about how interested you are by whether you do things like that. So just be aware. I think that's unfortunate because teenagers don't think that way in my experience, but college people don't understand that. So if you get emails from colleges you're interested in, understand that they might be tracking that sort of data as demonstrated interest. All right, a couple last things, because I can see your eyes starting to glaze over, which happens a lot when I talk. Let's talk about stress in the college admissions process. There's certainly a belief out there that the college process has to be stressful. And I'm not sure I believe that. Although there are a confusing number of deadlines and plans, I can't keep them straight, and I've been doing this for 35 years. Colleges are not particularly transparent about how they make decisions. And as I said earlier, there's a billion-dollar industry who's trying to make a living off of you and increasing your anxiety. Ultimately, I think the college process is pretty rational in that, as a counselor, I am rarely shocked by decisions. I could probably sit down in September and tell you, here's where our close calls are going to be. Some of them are going to get in, some of them aren't. But I don't see decisions out of left field. And I think that's particularly true of the publics in Virginia. As I deal with them, they're pretty rational. That doesn't mean you always get what you want, because they're also, a couple of them are pretty selective, but they're pretty reasonable to work with, in my experience. I would argue there's no reason, ultimately, for college-related stress. And why do I say that? Because the truth is, every one of you will go to college unless you choose not to. Every one of you is going to go to college. Now, I have to throw in the disclaimer here, your results may vary. But in the United States, there's no one who can't go to college if they want to. The question is, why are you going to college? When are you going to college? And where are you going to college? And in my experience, most of the stress in the college admissions process comes out of that question, where are you going to college? 80% of students, according to research, end up attending their first choice college. So it's not a question that most kids are going to end up where they want to be. And the college is generally a choice between good options. Some of you may be familiar with the Serenity Prayer that is used by 12-step groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous. Unfortunately, there's no College Admissions Anonymous, although I'm thinking about starting one. The Serenity Prayer says this. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that has great application to the college process and the stress piece. In this process, there are things you can control and there are things you can't control. You can control how much time and energy you devote to the process, how much you think about it. You control where you apply. If you think you have anxiety, I used to work in college admissions, and every day when the mail came in, this was back before electronic applications, we would descend like